Hello, welcome to a Cosmic Chaos video. Today we are going to be ranking Arkham villains. So here's the tier list: S, A, B, C, D. We're going to be ranking everybody S to D. We're going to start with Victor Zsasz. Now Victor Zsasz was a villain that was in Arkham Asylum. He was in the beginning of Arkham Asylum. He had a hostage and Batman took him out pretty quickly, knocking him out. He was also in Arkham City and had a pretty good side mission. Overall, his character design was very good. He's a very interesting villain, very interesting personality, very crazy, complete psycho, but he just wasn't used that much. He was used well, he was done well, but not enough of a threat. So I'm gonna put Victor Zsasz in B tier. Up next is Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze had a great character design in Arkham Origins, City, and Arkham Knight. He's known to have arguably the best boss fight in the whole Arkham series from Arkham City. He also had a pretty good boss fight in Arkham Origins and in Arkham Knight. The side mission DLC he has is also very good. I think he's a very interesting character. He's used very well in the Arkham series. In a way, you can relate to him and feel bad for him because of what happened to his wife. So he's a very in-depth character with a great personality, and he was used as one of the main villains in Arkham City. He was done very well. The voice acting was always great. He's a big threat to Batman, and what they were using Mr. Freeze for was great. So his character was used very well, and I'm gonna put Mr. Freeze in the A tier. Next, we have Clayface. I remember his boss fight from Arkham City. When I think of Clayface, that's what I think of. That's when I think of Clayface from the Arkham games. The first thing that comes to my mind is Clayface from Arkham City and his boss fight, and how he tricked Batman that he was the Joker, and it actually ended up being Clayface pretending to be the Joker. And that's also known to be a very good boss fight. Not as good as Mr. Freeze's, but he definitely has a pretty good boss fight. And that part of the game is really one of the moments that puts you in a quick surprise, quick shock. It's a moment that really does help make Arkham City even better than it already was. And it was definitely a really cool moment, and really surprised. It was when it happened, it was extremely surprising. Now, I do think Clayface is a good villain. I'm not the biggest fan of Clayface personally, but I do think he's good. I would have to put Clayface in B tier. Okay, next we have Hush. Hush was in multiple of the Arkham games, and the one that I played that I actually saw him in was Arkham Knight. I played all the other Arkham games, but I did the actual side mission where Hush looked exactly like Bruce Wayne, and that mission was pretty good. Now, Hush isn't used that much in the Arkham games, but he definitely is a pretty interesting villain. But I'm not the biggest fan. I would have to put Hush in C tier. He wasn't used enough and wasn't even in the main story, so I can't put him any higher than that. Next is Hugo Strange. So I think that he is A tier because he was very important to Arkham City. he was one of the main villains, and I think the version of the character we got of him was used very well. I think that the character design is good. I think that he's very interesting. I think putting him below A tier would be wrong, so I'm going to put him in A tier. He's very intelligent, so he poses as a very big threat to Batman. Next is Arkham Knight. Now, many people don't like him, many people do like him, and I'm one of the people that do like him. He's really Jason Todd, but there was a lot of people before the game came out who thought that Arkham Knight was going to be Jason Todd, but Rocksteady said that it wasn't, and then a bunch of people got mad when the game came out that it ended up actually being Jason Todd and that they lied, and so some people think he's great, some people think he's okay, some people think he's not too good, but I think he's good. Great character. Well done. Used great. He's a huge threat in Arkham Knight. I think his character design's good. I like that it ended up being Jason Todd and how they used that in the story. And the only thing I would have liked to see them do more with Arkham Knight would be to have made him even more of a threat. Because in Arkham Knight, it feels like the Arkham Knight just gets taken out pretty early. Like, it feels like he could have lasted a little bit longer and just been seen as even more dangerous as he was already seen. But overall, I do think he's a great character. I found him very interesting, and I'm going to put him in A tier. Next is Catwoman. So in Arkham City, during the main story, you actually got to play as her, and that was great. I think she was a great villain. She wasn't the most evil, but she was used well. Her character design was good. She was interesting. In Arkham Knight, you also got to play as her during the Riddler trophy missions and all that. I think that in the Arkham games, she was a decent level threat, but she also wasn't too evil. And I think this was a great version of Catwoman, and I'm gonna put her in A tier. Next is Harley Quinn. So Harley Quinn was in every single Arkham game. She was used great in all of them. And the thing is, I'm a big fan of this version of Harley Quinn, and also Harley Quinn from the animated series. I'm not a big fan of the new Harley Quinn from the Suicide Squad and all these new movies. I like the older version of the character. And in the Arkham games, she is used very good in every single one. In Arkham Asylum, in Arkham Origins, in Arkham Knight, in Arkham City. In Arkham City, she was supposed to be pregnant, and then she wasn't. And she tricks Batman, and Joker tricks Batman, and he actually ends up being fine, and it's crazy. In Arkham Asylum, she was used very well. In all the games, she had great character designs, great voice acting. Her voice was always spot on. Very interesting character. And then when we look at her later in Arkham Knight, when she is sad about the Joker being gone, is just done so well, and she's been used so well throughout all the Arkham games, and she really is one of the main villains, and this really is a top tier version of Harley Quinn, no doubt about it. And in Arkham Origins, we saw the part of how she met Joker and helped Joker and became who she is today. And I'm very close to putting her in S tier, but the only thing I would say is that she's a huge threat, physical threat. She's very skilled fighter, very powerful, intelligent, but she could be more of a threat, and she could be used even more and have been used to just be a little bit more of a threat to Batman. She's always a decent threat. You know what? I'm gonna put Harley Quinn in S tier. She's overall a great villain, so she's gonna be the first S tier. Up next is Black Mask. So Black Mask, when I think of him, the first thing I think of is Arkham Origins and how Joker was pretending he was Black Mask, and then there was the big reveal that it was just the Joker. And Black Mask was in Arkham Knight, and he was a side mission, and you played as Red Hood, and Red Hood ended up taking him out. He ended up, Black Mask, he wasn't the biggest threat. He wasn't used in the Arkham games as that big of a threat. He's a pretty interesting character, but he's more of just some side villain. I do think he has a decent character design. He's decently interesting, but he could have been used more. He could have been used more as a threat, and he's just not that good of a villain. So I'm gonna put him in C tier. I don't think he should be any higher than that. Next we have Howard Brandon, who was a corrupt officer in Arkham Origins. D tier. He's a very minor villain in the Arkham series. Next, Deadshot. Deadshot is in Arkham Origins. He's also in Arkham City, and he's also in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. But we're not going to count that as an Arkham game. If I had to rank him, I'd put him in C. I just don't see how he's that good of an Arkham villain, especially compared to the rest. He's not terrible, he's not bad, but nothing stands out about him to me. Next, Two-Face. Two-Face was in Arkham City and Arkham Knight. In Arkham City, I remember in Arkham City, he was hanging Catwoman over the acid, and Batman ended up stopping him. But also in Arkham Knight, there's all those side missions with Two-Face. So I think in the Arkham games, we have a great version of Two-Face, and I really did like the side missions that Two-Face had in Arkham Knight. I think they were great. They were very fun. But I would place Two-Face in the B tier. Next, we have Sickle, which is a guy that was a boss fight in Arkham City. He's one of those big, muscular, dumb type of characters. He's not a main character. He's one of the more side type of villains. I would put him in C tier. Next, we have Mr. Hammer. He's pretty much this big clown guy who worked for the Joker, who had a pretty good boss fight in Arkham City. I think he's a pretty unique character. I would put him in C tier. He's just a side character. Next, we have Bane. So Bane was in Arkham Asylum, City, and Origins. In Arkham Asylum, he had a very good boss fight, and he ended up getting hit by the Batmobile. I think in all the games, he has a great character design, and his voice actor in all the games did a great job. I like his voice. He's huge in all the games. The character is physically huge and imposing, intimidating, very powerful. In Arkham Origins, he was shown to be very smart, and out of all the games, that's where they used him the most. And I think he was used great. And in Arkham City, he was a side mission. And yeah, Bane, he's a pretty solid villain, so I'm gonna go ahead and put him in A tier. Up next, we have Electrocutioner. He was in Arkham Origins and had a small boss fight against Batman. And the fight did not last very long. He wasn't much of a main villain, just some quick side villain. And after that fight, you can't really take him too seriously or see him as too much of a threat, since he got flying sidekick KO'd by Batman so fast. I'm gonna go ahead and put him in D tier. Up next, we have Firefly. Firefly appeared in Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight. He had a great boss fight in Arkham Origins. I also like the voice actor for both games and the character design for both games. In Arkham Knight, the boss fight was okay, and he had side missions. Overall, just because of how good he was in Origins and his boss fight, and how he was still pretty decent in Arkham Knight, I'd put him in B tier. I also like the voice acting and the voice for Firefly. Up next, we have Talia al Ghul. I think the version of the character we got of her in the Arkham games was done very well. In Arkham City, she had a great part of the story with Batman and her father, Ra's al Ghul. I think she was used great. I think her character design is good. I think she was an interesting character. Later, she ended up dying, but I think this is a very good version of the character. We really only got her used a decent amount in Arkham City, but I think she was a great character, and I would say that she is A tier. Up next is Anarky. Now, Anarky was in Arkham Origins, and he was just some side mission. He's not very much of a threat, but the side mission was pretty good, and I think he was a decently interesting character. But just because we didn't see him that much, and he wasn't a very big threat, I think that I'm gonna have to put him in C tier. Now we're moving on to Killer Croc. When I first think about Killer Croc, I just think of Arkham Asylum and how in the beginning of the game you first see him just coming out of the elevator, and he's huge, and especially when it's your first time playing the game, you immediately just feel how intimidating he is. It really feels like a horror game. Killer Croc also had a very good boss fight in Arkham Asylum. Probably one of my favorites in that game, if not even possibly my favorite. His is definitely the one right now that I'm thinking about that I really did like. And he was also in Arkham City. He was in Arkham City, but he made some small appearance. He was also in Arkham Origins, and he had another pretty good boss fight. The way he was portrayed in Arkham Origins was different, but I think that version of his character in Arkham Origins was very well done too. I think in all the games, the voice acting is good, all the character designs are good, but then we go to Arkham Knight, and this character design is different. And whether I think it's as good as the others, but I do like it. It's different. It is different though. And I think the side mission with him is pretty good. And overall, in each game, I really do like this character and find him very interesting. I just wish that he was used more in either Arkham Knight or Arkham City, just because of how much I like the character. And I feel he could have been used more. But just because of how scary he is, how intimidating, how much of a threat he feels like, he really is a very good villain. And I'm going to put him in A tier. Up next is Nyssa. She is an Arkham Knight. She's from the League of Assassins. She's a pretty interesting character and was used pretty well, but she's not a very major character. She's just a side character in the Arkham game. She's a pretty good villain, but I would put her in B tier. Now, Penguin. Penguin was in Arkham Origins, he was in Arkham City, he was in Arkham Knight, and in Arkham Origins, I remember the scene where Batman had him up in the air with one hand by the neck, and Deathstroke attacks Batman, and they end up having that amazing boss fight. And I think Penguin was great in that game, used well, great character design, great voice acting, great design and voice acting in City and Arkham Knight as well. Also in Arkham City, he was used very well. I think the boss fight with him was good. And then later in Arkham Knight, he had great side missions. I think that he was a great part of the Arkham games. He was never the main focus, the main villain. But when you did encounter him, the way he was used and, you know, the lines he said and everything he did was interesting. And I loved playing through the games and him being a part of it. And he was definitely a decent threat. So I'm going to go ahead and put Penguin in A tier. Now, Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy has a great character design. She's great in Asylum and Knight. In Asylum, she had a great boss fight. She was used very well. She was a big threat. And in Arkham Knight, she really tried to save Gotham. And she was one of the main villains, it felt like. And she was used very well. And she was interesting. So just because of all that, I feel like I'm leaning more towards A. So I'm going to put Poison Ivy in A tier. She was a very good villain in the Arkham games. Next, we have Deathstroke. Straight off the bat, great, amazing boss fight in Arkham Origins. When I played the boss fight, I thought it was great. I think his character design in the Arkham games is very good. I think his personality and the way he was used was done very good. I think that in Arkham Knight, even though he wasn't seen used as good by many people, I still think he was used very good in the story and for the side missions. In Origins, that boss fight was just great. I think I'm going to put Deathstroke in A tier. So yes, Deathstroke, A tier. He's a very big threat for Batman. Up next is Man-Bat. Now, I really do like Man-Bat. He was in Arkham Knight. A great side mission, probably one of my favorite side missions in Arkham Knight. I really do like Man-Bat, that whole story, and how he's a man who turned himself into a bat, and that whole mission was just so fun to play, and I really do find the character interesting, and I wish he was used more, and I wish Man-Bat was used more in the Arkham series and all the games, and made more of a main character, and he never really is seen as too much of a threat, but I really do like the character, and I think he's done great. I think he's used very well. I think he looks very intimidating. He's very scary. His character design is great, but I can't see him being past B tier. Even though the character is great, he's not enough of a threat, and he's not used enough to be any higher. So Man-Bat is gonna be in B tier. Up next is Professor Pyg. Professor Pyg had a great side mission in Arkham Knight. I love his character design. He's very interesting. He's very creepy. It feels like a horror game when you're playing through the side missions and you end up finding him and literally smashing his head into the table. And he's one of these confused, crazy Batman villains that was done very well, and the way they used him was good for the side missions. He could have been used more though, because his character design and the way he was done was so good. They could have used him more as a main character. He was great. That's probably one of my favorite side missions in Arkham Knight, or in all of the Arkham games, just because of how good of a villain he was. And he's not the most powerful villain or physical threat, but he is intelligent and very unique, and he poses as a threat just because of how much of a lunatic he is, and just because of how he thinks. I'm gonna have to put Professor Pyg in the A tier. He is a great villain that should have honestly been used more, or hopefully if they make more Arkham games, he's used, because I want to see more of Professor Pyg just because of how good of a villain he really is. Next is Mad Hatter. Mad Hatter was in Arkham City, Origins, and Night. I think that all his side missions are great. I think that he's extremely interesting, extremely well done. His character design is good. The voice acting is very good. I think that he's a very unique character, great personality. You know, another crazy villain, almost similar to Professor Pyg in a way. But the side missions, when you play them, it's like a horror game, and it's a lot of fun. And if you go play the side missions, I'm sure you'll see what I mean. He was never really a big part of the main story, but just because of how good his character design is and how great he was used in the side missions and how great of a villain he is, and he really took you on an adventure, also being a pretty big threat to Batman, I'm gonna put Mad Hatter in A tier. Ra's al Ghul was amazing in Arkham City. The boss fight was great. It was a great boss fight. Other than the Mr. Freeze boss fight, I would say this was the best boss fight in Arkham City. Arguably top 5 in the Arkham games as a boss fight. And Ra's al Ghul was very interesting. When you played the part of the story with him, you're literally zoned into, like, you literally feel like you're in the game because of how interesting it is and how it really catches your attention. And I remember when I played that, I was having so much fun, and it just shows how great of a villain he is and how serious of a threat he was to Batman. It also shows how evil he really is. He was never a main villain, but he was a great villain and used very well. So I'm going to put him in A tier. He was also an Arkham Knight and had a great side mission. He was never one of the main villains, but I'm still going to put him in A tier. Great Arkham villain. Next is Deacon Blackfire. He was pretty good as a side mission, but he's a very minor villain. He wasn't used much. He's okay. I just have him in C tier personally. Yeah, not much to say about Deacon Blackfire. Next is Warden Quincy Sharp. He was corrupt. I think the character design and everything about him was great. This version was good, but we just didn't see him much. He wasn't used much. He wasn't made too much of a threat. So I'm gonna put Warden Quincy Sharp in the C tier. Lady Shiva. She was only in Arkham Origins. She was more of a side villain in Arkham Origins. We didn't get much from her. She wasn't used that well. She wasn't a major threat. Just more of a minor side villain in the Arkham universe. I'm gonna put her in C tier. We didn't get much of her. Copperhead. A pretty solid villain from Arkham Origins. Her boss fight was pretty good. She was a decent level threat. She was a big challenge for Batman and gave Batman a hard time. I would put her in B tier. I think she's a pretty good villain. Next is Frank Bowles. He was a corrupt officer in Arkham Asylum who helped Joker. He wasn't used very much. He was a very minor villain, so I'm going to put him in D tier. Next is Calendar Man. I think his character design was great, but I'm going to have to say it. I think he's C tier. He had a quick part in Arkham City and also Arkham Knight where you saw him. He's pretty interesting, but he wasn't made much of a threat and he wasn't used. Could have been used way more in the Arkham games in the main story, but he wasn't. Up next is Solomon Grundy. I really do like Solomon Grundy. I remember when I first played Arkham City, I was really looking forward to seeing Solomon Grundy, and yeah, he's pretty good. The boss fight was pretty challenging. He's very intimidating. He really is an imposing villain. He really is an interesting villain. The boss fight was good. He was only used for that short part in Arkham City where Penguin reveals him and then you end up defeating him. And yeah, he was used very well, and his character design and everything was great about him, but was just not used enough and was not made as a main villain enough. He was only in that small part of the game. Very minor villain in the Arkham games, but done very well, and a great villain that could have been used more. And I would put him in B tier. Next, Azrael. So he was playable in Arkham Knight, and the side mission with him of the story he had was pretty good. I found it pretty interesting, especially when you first start playing it. He was a decent level threat to Batman, and he's a very skilled fighter. He was also in Arkham City and was pretty good in Arkham City as well. I also think his character design is good, and I think he's decently interesting, but he's nothing special, and he's pretty good, so I'll put him in B tier. Next, we have none other than the Riddler. He's the villain that everybody ended up getting annoyed by. He kept, annoying Batman constantly throughout the game. He's very intelligent, and in all the games you have to get all of his Riddler trophies, and he makes it very difficult. He plays all these mind tricks on you, using all these riddles, really being a mental threat to Batman. Out of all the villains, he's the most intelligent, and he's not the biggest physical threat, but he really is a great villain. Very interesting character, and then when you finally collect all his Riddler trophies and get to beat him up in Arkham Knight, it's great. So I think that the Riddler was used great in the Arkham games. I think he's a great villain. I think how he's constantly, trying to get to Batman, be in Batman's head, annoy him, is great. I think that it shows how good of a villain Riddler really is, because he's not, the craziest. He's not the creepiest. He's not the strongest. He's not the most skilled villain. But the way he is so smart and sets things up in a way where it really gets to Batman, and it's gonna make him go crazy just because he can't handle anymore all this, all these games the Riddler's playing with him. It really shows how great of a villain he is in the Arkham games. I love his character design. I think he's very interesting. I think he's a great villain. Great. And in a way, you could almost put him in S tier, just because of how unique of a villain he really is and how much he really means to the Arkham games. But I don't think he's quite there, so I'm going to put the Riddler in A tier. Scarecrow. Right away, he is one of the main villains in the Arkham games. In Arkham Asylum, I love his character design. He looks very unique. He's never been seen looking like this before. You see his skinny body because his stomach is revealed. You can see how skinny and weak he is and how he's not a physical threat. But his fear toxin, that is the real threat. His mind games. He gets to Batman. And in Arkham Asylum, he relentlessly goes after Batman. And Scarecrow really makes Arkham Asylum feel like a horror game. If you're a horror fan, you'll love Scarecrow. He is a terrifying villain. He makes Arkham Asylum feel so creepy. I remember when Batman sees his parents in the body bags, and then you end up going into the great boss fight with Scarecrow in Arkham Asylum. That is one of the best boss fights in the Arkham games. Scarecrow is huge, and the whole atmosphere is amazing. You feel how in depth he is as a villain. He later gets taken out by Killer Croc in Arkham Asylum, but he made that game have the horror aspect that it did, that people still love to this day. In Arkham Asylum, when he's making these truly terrifying things happen to other inmates or people, and you're just watching it all happen, and it's like a complete horror movie. It shows why he's a great villain and what's so special about him as a character. And then when he came back in Arkham Knight and we got the new version of him, the new character design, that was awesome. I thought was great, again, just like the last character design. And he felt so powerful, he felt so intimidating, taking over Gotham and getting so close to defeating Batman. This game made Scarecrow such an even bigger threat than he already was in Arkham Asylum that I'm gonna say I have to put Scarecrow at S tier. He is an amazing Arkham villain. I can't see him being below S tier. His voice acting was amazing in both games. The feeling he brings to the Arkham games, this horror, creepy aspect, and the constant uncertainty of comfort and whether something creepy or scary or terrifying is going to happen. He's an extremely interesting villain. And he's definitely one of the best Arkham villains we have. And one of the best versions of the character we've ever got. So Scarecrow, he's S tier. Up next, the Clown Prince of Crime, the Joker, without a doubt, S tier. How could he not be? Let's start at the beginning of Arkham Asylum. From the get-go, he's constantly taunting everybody as he's being taken to his cell. And then in the elevator, when the lights go out and he starts laughing like a complete psycho. Joker brings the aspect of chaos to all the games. He's crazy, and the elevator scene really shows it. He later escapes Arkham Asylum and makes so much trouble for Batman. At the end of the game, he had a boss fight where he injected himself and became giant. The boss fight was good. It definitely was not the best by any means, but it was pretty good. Then, in Arkham City, making even more trouble and bringing even more chaos to Batman, making it seem like he was very sick, and then out of nowhere, surprising Batman and tricking him and injecting him with his own blood to try to make Batman go get cures for both of them. And he has non-stop iconic lines like, for example, out of all people you should know there's plenty wrong with me. Oh, and I forgot to mention, he's voice acted by none other than Mark Hamill, the best Joker voice actor there is, and I would arguably say the greatest Joker of all time. But that's only in Arkham City, Asylum, and Knight, because in Arkham Origins he's voiced by Troy Baker. But later in Arkham City, Joker, he does end up dying. In Origins, Troy Baker did a great job voice acting as well, and in the beginning of the game, Joker pretends he's Black Mask and then reveals himself to Batman, acting completely like a lunatic. And throughout the whole game, we learn much more about the Joker's past. For example, how he met Harley Quinn. His character design in this game was amazing, great, just like the past games in Asylum and City. In this game, we see how Batman and Joker first met and how they were thought to be partners because Batman saved Joker, and Joker acts so annoying about it to Batman. At the end of the game, Batman finally stops Joker and gets him arrested. The next time we see Joker is in Arkham Knight once again, but this time Batman, he's just seeing him. I don't know if it's because Joker injected him with his blood or what, but he's pretty much there just talking to Batman throughout the whole game, whether he's trying to annoy him, get to him, taunt him, or just get Batman's attention. It's a great part of the game having Joker there, even though he's supposed to be gone, making the game so much more interesting and fun. We also see how Harley feels since Joker's gone, and Joker's reaction to it is just so entertaining and shows how crazy he is. At the end of the game, we get a boss fight where Joker is pretty much stopped by Batman, and he's worried that he's going to be forgotten about, and he wants Batman to save him, but Batman, he lets him be forgotten about, or at least leaves Joker thinking he's going to be forgotten about, because Joker's fear is being forgotten about. And that boss fight you go through once again in Arkham Knight, it's great. And the whole time you have to remember he's being voice acted by Mark Hamill, which is great. Also has a great laugh. And Troy Baker did a phenomenal job too. So that's making him even more top tier of a version of the character. Without Joker in the Arkham games, it just would not feel right. He is so special to the Arkham games. He means so much for them. He brings so much to them. Also, in Arkham Knight, we see how he abused Red Hood and mentally and physically deteriorated him and just completely abused him, which made the game so much better. Throughout all the Arkham games, we see he really is a huge threat to Batman and Gotham, and why he is Gotham's greatest villain, and how even with him gone, he still poses as such a big problem for Batman because he's injected Batman and others with his blood that was infected. I would say, without a doubt, he is the best Arkham villain. Who's gonna argue with that? So Joker, amazing. He is S tier, clearly. So that is my Arkham villains list. Let me know in the comments down below your favorite Arkham villains and how you would rank them. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications. That would be greatly appreciated. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next Cosmic Chaos video. Bye.